Hi, my name is Mike Holliday with Land Rover Reno, and this is Oxford in America.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Oxford in America. In our last episode, we just crawled out of the Black Rock Desert, which is the home of the iconic Burning Man Festival. Now, we're pulling into Reno, Nevada, where we're meeting our good friend Mike Halliday from the Finley Auto Group at Land Rover Reno.
And everything's going great.
Really?
Yeah, well, not really.
So we left the hotel in Reno, and we're trying to get to the dealership.
Right.
And we didn't get very far.
Now, we were having problems. As we came out of the Black Rock Desert, things, we were literally going downhill.
True, we were definitely going downhill. But it was like some sort of ignition problem. It just sputtering,
Yep.
and we weren't really quite sure what it was. Yeah, so we're trying to get from the hotel to the dealership, and it just cut off at a light.
Right.
We cranked, and we barely got it started again. Point of fact, when we got to the dealership, we had to push it into the service bay.
That seems to be the theme here. We've been doing a lot of pushing. In the last episode, you probably heard us talk about pushing. Well, here we did it again.
Yeah. So we really didn't know what was the problem precisely. It was some sort of ignition problem. And amazingly, we had a hero come out of nowhere.
Hi, my name is James Dunstan. I live here in Northern California, a small town called Weaverville, or near Weaverville anyway. A year ago I was in England and I was in Southampton, met with Oxford, the Land Rover, the famous Land Rover. Then a couple of months ago I heard Oxford would be passing through close to this area. So I reached out to David Short, the expedition leader on that trip, and he happened to be in Reno at the time, and Oxford was not running so well. So long story short, I told David I had a 1953 Land Rover, which was this Land Rover in particular, and at the time was running great. So long story short, like I said, we stole some parts from this Land Rover, and I drove 4 hours to Reno and met with David and Mike, the other driver.
James jumped right in, and we started to look at each component of the ignition system. The points, condenser, rotor, distributor cap, and even the spark plugs. None of it looked great, so we replaced a lot of it using the parts that James brought with him. James' can-do attitude and his box of parts were a godsend.
It was a lot of fun being a part of that, and you never know where Oxford might show up, so I don't know where I'll see you next, but I look forward to it.
Thank you, James Dunstan. So before we knew those parts were coming from our friend in California, we made a call to our good sponsor at Rovers North. And they were right on the spot, they understood our problem, and they overnighted a whole package to us.
We got new points, condenser, cap, and most importantly, we found out later what we really needed was a coil.
The coil is an interesting story. When we got Oxford from England from the last trip, and it first arrived in America back in January, I noticed that there were two coils zip tied together.
Right.
And I probably should have known what that meant. But we figured out that the coils were bad. And the last team had realized that too, so they put two bad coils on the truck, and every time the coil got hot and started missing, they would just swap coils. Well, for the price of a coil, we threw the two bad coils away.
And the new coil did the trick.
Right.
That got the ignition problem solved. Well, sort of solved.
Sort of. With the ignition system sorted, we decided to take advantage of the generosity of the dealership and move on to some other repairs. The other problem with Oxford at this point, which we didn't know about when we started, was Oxford really took up the mantra of being a rover and was leaking a bit.
Yeah, marking its territory wherever it went.
Yeah, we're putting 2 quarts of E90 in.
Yeah.
Somewhere in the transfer case overdrive, we had a leak, and it was leaking terribly as we drove down the road. We put it up on the lift, cleaned things up a whole lot trying to find it, and we really couldn't find the smoking gun, where it was leaking from. We cleaned it all up, tightened all the nuts and bolts we could tighten up, and we said we'd keep an eye on it, and off we went. It was time to get Oxford off the lift and onto a quick bath to knock off some of that desert dust so that she was ready for what we really came for. The whole purpose of stopping at Land Rover Reno was to show Oxford off. We backed her into a showcase spot in the front of the dealership and tucked in nicely between a new Defender 110 and a Discovery 5, all dressed up in its U.S. Olympic ski team livery. We hung around and answered a lot of questions, took loads of photos, and just enjoyed our time with the dealership team. And the guys at the dealership?
Oh, they were outstanding. They worked right there with us. They let us use the bay. We were able to put the Oxford up on a lift and check fluids, and that was really a nice thing for them to support us the way they did.
And our next objective is climbing this mountain to get up to Lake Tahoe, which rests on the border between Nevada and the state of California. And we took off in the morning and things were going great. Through Carson City, down 395, took a right, started climbing up the mountain toward Lake Tahoe. We were climbing the mountain, Oxford's working hard.
Yep. As the altitude went up, the temperature of outside temperature was going up, Oxford temperature was going up, and so was ours.
Yeah, and we got about halfway up.
Yeah.
And Oxford said enough and conked out on the side of the road, and that was that. Couldn't get it restarted, and there we sat on the side of the road with the hood up, radiator boiling over, and it was north of 100 degrees already, and that probably was the lowest moment of the entire trip.
Yep.
We just worked so hard in Reno. We thought we had things fixed. We didn't. We're on the side of the road, broken down on the side of this highway, cars running by as fast as can be, sun beating down as hard as it could.
And here we had to go through troubleshooting, trying to figure out, we thought we had the ignition problem solved, so what else could it be?
Yeah, and it turned out that our friends from Montana can probably vouch for, Oxford had some sort of weird fueling problem. We replaced the fuel pump in Oregon when we did the refurb on Oxford, but that didn't seem to fix the problem. They were still failing to get fuel to the carburetor, and I don't know whether it was boiling, overheating, whether it was vapor locking, but our solution was to put the second fuel pump back in it.
We had a spare fuel pump, just a generic pump. Oxford has 2 fuel tanks, and so the factory original fuel pump that we had replaced new in Oregon was just working awful hard, and in that heat, the only thing we could figure was just not quite up to the task to pull fuel out of the second tank. So we broke out the spare we had and plumbed it in right there on the side of the road, and Oxford fired up, and away we went.
Yeah, we let things cool down, put the fuel pump in it, let us cool down.
Yeah, that was a big part of it.
It was so hot, and the sun was coming down so hard, we were desperate for shade, but we're kind of in the deserts of Nevada, and all that we could find was one 4-foot pine tree that was not very big. And Mike and I are huddled under this pine tree trying to find a little patch of shade.
Yeah, fighting over the shade.
Waiting for the truck to cool down, waiting for us to improve our mood and our temper. But eventually things worked out, and we got back in the truck, got it going again, and roadside repair number 2 down, and up to the top of the mountain we got. And we arrived at Lake Tahoe. Beautiful vacation, iconic resort. And when you're on this kind of adventure, watches and calendars really kind of become inconsequential to you. You're going. And we got to the top of the mountain and got to this resort town, and oh my God, traffic was horrible.
Turned out it was a holiday weekend.
It was Labor Day weekend, and who'd have thunk it? So we got up there, and oh my God, it was again, 100 degrees. We're in stop and go traffic, trying to drive around the lake, and so much traffic. It was not enjoyable.
Stop and go, stop and go,
Yeah.
stop and go.
We were making horrible progress, but eventually we were able to get around the lake and,
Yeah.
and see some of the sights that are on the lake.
Yep.
So normally Lake Tahoe is beautiful, crystal blue waters, big long vistas across the water, mountains in the distance. But when we got there,
Yeah, the forest fire smoke from the California fires were just settling down on the lake. As the day went on, the smoke got worse.
yeah, so we really didn't have great views. We saw a lot of taillights in front of us.
Right.
We saw a lot of smoke across the lake, and it was still so hot. We got around to the other side, the far side of the lake, the California side of the lake. The roads got interesting. We had those twisty twistbacks.
Yeah.
And those twistbacks were awful fun, going back and forth. We weren't going really fast, but it was still fun to go back and forth on the twistbacks. We had to take another break on the other side and just let
Right.
Oxford cool back down again. I think the brakes started to give out because they were just getting so hot coming down those.
All right. With the traffic and the downhills, we were on the brakes a lot, so we just stopped and let everything cool down, let us cool down, let the traffic kind of subside a little bit before we continued the trip.
Once we were free of Lake Tahoe, we thought the road would open back up for us. But our bad luck held, and we found ourselves driving toward another major fire. It slowed us down with some road closures and some detours that took us through some neat old towns. And unfortunately, all of that cost us a lot of time for the day. We had an objective to get off Lake Tahoe and back down to the valley by evening time for our campsite, and it didn't look good for that.
Yeah, it got later and later till we were looking for campsites in the dark.
And but we did luck out, and we found this beautiful camping spot on the side of the road.
Yeah, great spot. Nice wide pull off. We were able to get off the highway. Campsite was right next to a really pretty stream in between the mountains. Absolutely gorgeous.
Now, we were warned about bears.
Yeah, it had gotten so late, and we were, cooking dinner, and by the time, really tired from a long day. So our preparations for a possible visit by a bear were fairly minimal.
Fairly minimal. And it turned out what we did do was good enough, I guess. But we did get a visitor.
We did get a visitor. I was woken up at night by something bumping into my tent cot.
And I'm dead asleep, dead to the world. And Mike's fussing at me from the other tent saying, "David, get up, we got a visitor." Who's visiting us at 2 in the morning?
Yeah, about that time we heard our food trunks getting rearranged.
So Mike says, "It's a bear." And I stood up in the tent, bolt up, and I looked out the screen at the end of my tent, and I could see just around Oxford, just in the dark, in the moonlight, our food crates, which we'd put far away from the campsite as part of our precautions. And there was a big old bear sniffing through our food crates.
Your tent was between my tent and the bear, so I didn't really get a good view of him. I was getting all the play-by-play from you, what was going on.
And I really wasn't eager to jump out of the tent in my undershorts and start looking around the campsite at night
No.
for a bear. So we just sat in our tents for the rest of the night, hoping that the bear had decided he'd had enough and he'd left. And our good night's sleep interrupted, not much sleep after that.
True.
But when the sun came out, we kind of got up, looked around the campsite, and he enjoyed our food boxes for a little bit. Luckily, he didn't take too much of our food. Luckily, he bit into something he didn't like, and he didn't like the taste of it, or either me shouting at him or whatever. But he took off, and everything was fine. But it was, I think we got out pretty easy on the bear.
We did.
But that was pretty exciting. A little more excitement than we bargained for. But it's part of the California experience is having a visit from a bear in the night. Well, that does it for this episode. In our next episode, we'll continue our ventures towards Southern California
We'll see you next time.
on Oxford in America.